Hello there. Right, let me just get in position. Okay, so thank you very much for bringing me over. A small charity like ours in St Ives in the UK could never afford to come over here, so I'm really grateful that you helped us come over here, and it's been great meeting you. There's still a lot of people I need to meet, but I've enjoyed meeting the ones I have so far. So one reason I am here is to connect with you, but it's also to sort of so you know who we are. It's to share our experiences with the residents. Oh, sorry.
No,
Is that better, or am I completely distorted now?
No,
Oh, okay, right. So as well as connecting with you, I want to share our experiences. I want you to know about us. I want you to understand about our experience with VR, which is slightly different, or adding a little bit to Helen's. And but the main reason I'm here is I really, really want to encourage you to have residencies in your buildings or near your buildings, or to invite artists into your archives, because I really feel that this is a way of keeping your artists' legacies alive, and really also the things that you love, which is art, is to keep making it happening and supporting the artists that are alive now. So that's one of my main things. But first I want to give you some context. So as you can see, the studios are right on Porthmeor Beach in St Ives. So, sorry, just not here. This is our building. St Ives is a tourist destination really now. So as you can see, on either side of our building there are now holiday accommodation, but most of them, all of that whole beach was full of these industrial pilchard factories, basically, industrial units, that were then taken over by fishermen. And the fishermen used the cellars, so you could see the green doors at the bottom, they're the fishermen's cellars still today. And then the loft spaces were eventually taken over by artists. And so you can see here that Julius Olsen moved in, so 10 years after seine fishing went out of favour. Within that 10 years, artists had taken over these very light, roomy artist spaces, some of which were actually reconditioned to fit them. So after the war, I don't know if you know Ben Nicholson, but after the war, a group of artists, the leading artists of their time, gathered in this sort of Cornish harbour town of St Ives, right down in the southwest of Britain. They basically gathered together and really sort of created something special. And in 1949, the building, Porthmeor Studios, was sold for £6,000 with the guarantee that the artists that were there could stay there as long as they wanted, and that it would be used as studios for artists in perpetuity. So we have artists such as Patrick Heron on the left, other artists like Wilhelmina Barnes-Graham, Brian Winter, Terry Frost, and so on in Porthmeor Studios. But also in St Ives we had other artists who were very important, such as Barbara Hepworth, who was Ben Nicholson's wife at that time. And so St Ives was a very important place. It was basically a point of connection for people to talk about art, experiment with art in a global network, even though it's a really small place in quite a remote location. And so all these artists explored sort of modernism's abstract values, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that Pollock and Rothko were doing in the States at the same time. So Porthmeor Studios is on the edge of the Atlantic. As you remember on the first photo, it's right on the beach. It gets absolutely smashed by Atlantic storms in the winter, and if the sand is allowed to build up, the sea actually hits and is punched through the windows. So as you can see here, this photo of Patrick Heron, obviously years later than the one we saw earlier. If you see here, the studios started getting shabbier and shabbier. Water was pouring in, literally pouring in through the studios, and So in 2003, not that long ago, the trust decided to start raising money to save the studios, basically, and they employed Long and Kentish. So I'm sure some of you must be familiar with the work of the lovely MJ Long, who unfortunately died within the last few months. Anyway, so they did the renovation project, and that was completed in 2012. The idea of the renovation was to keep the character of the place, but new studios were added in so that to try and provide basically more rent to make it sustainable. And sustainable, I mean on a very low level, because basically the studios can run along to level, but it's with one part-time staff member who's my colleague and my boss. So that's what that rent pays for, and obviously to keep constantly looking after this timber frame building right on the Atlantic. So at the moment at Porthmeor Studios, this is Studio 3. At the moment in Porthmeor Studios we have 12 long-term artist tenants. We have the School of Painting, which has been based in their tenants in the building. They've been there for over 80 years. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the fishermen in the cellars who are still there. We have basically fishermen and artists have been sharing this building for 130 years, and we're the oldest, the oldest continuously used studio in Britain, but possibly wider. You have to tell me whether you know of any other studios. So what I wanted to say as well is that, I wanted to actually move on to the Porthmeor Artist Residency Programme, which I run. So it was it basically took inspiration from a couple of events in 1959. One was that the artist Francis Bacon came to Porthmeor Studios to work there for 6 months in Studio 3, the studio I just showed you a moment ago. So he was working towards his first solo show, and it was really his breakthrough show. And also in 1959, we had a visit by Mark Rothko, who's here, who visited Peter Lanyon, who's up here. And then the second person I pointed to is Terry Frost. So basically it shows that that this place, St Ives, was, as I mentioned before, a sort of connecting point in this global network of artists and artist discussions. And so that's what we've been trying to do with the residency programme, to bring back this idea. So basically that when people talk about St Ives, they talk about it as a tourist destination. It's one of the top British tourist destinations. It's been voted the top many times. But often it's described as was an artist colony, which hurts us. So we are really trying to make it where people say it is an artist colony, because it is. And so what we've been trying to do since 2017, we've been inviting artists into our space, into Porthmeor Studios. We give them a free studio. We give them, on the main part of the programme, £2,000 a month for a maximum of 3 months. And one of the main things for us is that we don't make them do anything. So we don't make them produce work or show us work at the end. And this is really important because it basically gives them, which is very rare for artists these days, it gives them creative space where they can really do what they do. They could just look out the window for a month or 3 months. None of them do. They are incredibly prolific, and but it just gives them that creative space. Because our feeling was that if we made them produce a piece of work at the end, it was as though we were commissioning them, actually not giving them creative space. So that's really quite an important part of our residency programme. And we found that by inviting established and emerging artists into our studio, where we have lots of artist tenants, where we're within an artist community and we're in a region that has a lot of artists, that we keep on inspiring the artists that are in the region. And in addition to that, it means that word of mouth comes out about us, and so it helps us in other ways. So we have 3 short let studios, the ones that I basically buy time in for my residencies, and it means that we have people like Sue Webster, who's she and her partner have split up. She always did work with Tin Noble and still Sue Webster. People like that, and Richard Long contact us to try and get short let studios, which is obviously really great for us, and it's basically increased the quality of artists that wants to come into our studio. So the residencies at the moment are substantially and unsustainably supported by Arts Council England, and also estates of artists such as Barbara Hepworth and Wilhelmina Barnes-Graham. And this has led to an increasing closer connection between the estates, the studios and the guest artists, which can only be a good thing. So many of our residents actually respond to St Ives artists or those in Porthmeor studios. So for example, this is Danny Fox, and he has responded. He says he's made covers, just as you cover a song. And so the picture of the yellow man in the background is basically responding to some works by an artist called Christopher Wood, who spent quite a little bit of time in St Ives. So he did a really weird, spooky yellow man painting, and then he also did these self portraits, and Danny Fox has sort of merged the two, and obviously in his own style. And then one of our emerging artists, Katie Schwab, she was very inspired by the Crusade silk that was made in St Ives. In fact, Patrick Heron used to do the designing for Crusade silk, and the silks were dried out on Porthmeor Beach, which outside the studio windows, and also used to dye the sea red, apparently. Well, different colours, not just red. And people like Rana Begum, who was actually a Tate St Ives resident. She was very inspired by the fishermen. You can see her spraying the nets that she got from them, and she also cast fishermen's floats for her Tate exhibition. We also take diversity very seriously. You know, the studios were traditionally used by white, middle-class, able-bodied men. We have more female artist tenants now, but we really try and bring diversity in through the residency programme. And also the artists who come, we don't require them to do anything, but we ask nicely if they wouldn't mind giving a public talk. And in their talks, not only do people hear about them, but they also hear about their sort of attraction to artists, the artists in the region, or artists they've become familiar with during the research. So, for example, in mid-May we have Lubaina Himid here, Porthmeor Studios right now, and she's talking about her work, and also the studio she's in that has traces, scribbles and painting marks from the artists that were there before, like Ben Nicholson and Patrick Heron. So to summarise about the residency, is basically by providing an inspiring studio and some money, we're fueling an interest in our past artists, our historic building, and providing a place where artists can flourish in their lifetime. Guest artists are given a breathing space that could initiate a turning point in their career. Artists and the general public can share the guest artist experience by meeting them and so on, and they can come sometimes to open studios at the end. And something I mentioned to one of somebody in the room here from yesterday was also it can make a gravitational pull. We get really quite interesting curators coming down because they want to try and meet the guest residents, which obviously then our normal artists, our trust artists, end up meeting them often. So I'd like to obviously discuss the VR experience that I said I would. I don't really like the aesthetics of this, so consider it as like a mood board. I don't like the font and so on. Even though the palette is an idea, it works as a timeline with different colours for different artists. But basically, with VR, so we were given a lot of public money to renovate Porthmeor Studios, and but because they're private working spaces for artists, people can't go into them. So we're always looking for a way that people can access to the studios without actually physically going into them. And so VR seemed like a good idea. And we also thought we might be able to connect with different audiences, such as young people. So what I can say right now is I'm going to share a couple of mistakes about that, or some misconceptions. So one is it's not a good idea to try and do two new things at the same time. So VR and sort of new technology and trying to get a new audience at the same time. It's good to just try and do one thing. The other thing is it's very easy to get dazzled by tech, and my practice-based PhD was in I made apps. It was about locative media, so I'm familiar with media, but I got excited by VR, and basically sometimes you have to stick with what you know best, and so potentially a series of podcasts or short films with a proper distribution strategy actually would reach more people. VR is quite, you need somebody to look after the person with the headset on, as Helen was making clear, and it's quite time heavy and also obviously very expensive. So for us, we're looking at different cheaper options, I would say. So actually, I'm just going to move on to that. So the other thing we're doing to try and use different technologies and so on of how to use the space is by inviting, we're going to have before the end of the year three residencies that focus on immersion, and it's artists who use technology in their work. And basically then we're inviting artists into our space, and we're going to be interested in what they come up with. And the reason I've got this image is because immersive sound is a really good thing. So I would say that because, again, my PhD involved immersive sound, so you're welcome to ask me any questions about it. But it's also a very good way of bringing things to life and sparking people's imagination. And I was going to say that I actually have like a kind of weird little document in a rather startling yellow. I don't know why it came out like that. That is just a very easy thing in case any of you are thinking of looking at sound things that you can just basically grab or ask me for the PDF. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for inviting me again, and so please connect with us. We would love artist exchanges, and we'd be interested in hosting your. I'm going to say it like I'm going to try an American accent in your HAHS photos if they go on tour to the UK. So please let me know, and also please let me know if there are any grants that we can apply for to try and get American artists to Porthmeor Studios to experience our location. And maybe you'll have to come too, I don't know. So thank you very much.